The millionaire saw the maid celebrating Christmas Eve with his sick daughter. The truth broke him. Winter in Chicago always arrived with a strange kind of silence, as if the entire city held its breath right before the snow touched the ground. That night, the sky was a muted gray, and snowflakes drifted slowly, softly, blanketing the endless streets below like a white morning veil. The lights from the skyscrapers shimmered across Lake Michigan. Beautiful, yes, but cold, just like the life of the man standing behind the glass window of a penthouse on the 43rd floor. Ethan Hale. Ethan, 45, CEO of Hale Medical Group, a name the private healthcare world treated with both respect and caution. He appeared on magazine covers, at charity galas, at conferences where everyone wanted to shake his hand, as though a single nod from him could change the fate of their hospitals. But behind the perfectly curated smiles, behind the millions in quarterly reports, was an emptiness no one ever saw. An emptiness named Ella. "She's asleep now, sir," his house manager told him one winter evening last year. Ethan only replied with a short, "All right," as if the information hardly concerned him. But he hadn't always been that way. 3 years earlier, on a quiet March afternoon, Ethan's phone buzzed in the middle of a board meeting. He almost ignored it until he saw the name. Rachel, his wife, the woman who never interrupted his work because she knew how much he hated being disturbed. He answered, ready to tease her gently, but the voice on the other end wasn't hers. "Mr. Hale, this is St. Matthew Hospital. Your wife has been in an accident. You need to come immediately." In that moment, his world collapsed like a building pulled from its foundations. He remembered running through the hospital halls, breath burning in his chest, hands numb from shock. He remembered the ER doors opening, the cold air rushing in, and the white sheet covering Rachel's body. He could still see her face, peaceful, almost sleeping, but her hands, once always warm, were now frighteningly cold. Outside the ER, a nurse held a 4-year-old girl, Ella. The child didn't understand what was happening. She only asked, "Where's Mommy? Daddy, where's Mommy?" That was the day half of Ethan died. From then on, he buried himself in work, like a man running from his own heart. He opened 2 new hospitals, signed 4 major investment deals, and traveled to 12 international conferences in a single year. Night after night, he stayed in his office until security had to remind him to go home. He did everything he could to avoid the house that had become too quiet, the house where a perfect family photo stabbed him in the chest every time he walked past it. And while Ethan ran, Ella grew up like an orphan with a living father. She had a bedroom larger than most families' apartments. She had tutors, toys, and expensive gifts shipped from every city Ethan visited. But what she didn't have was the one thing she needed most: her father's presence. Ethan didn't know it yet, but a truth even crueler than Rachel's death was approaching. A truth that would bring him to his knees and teach him that some losses cannot be repaired by money, power, or time. And that night, the snow kept falling over Chicago, silent, cold, as if it were warning him of what was to come. Sofia Ramirez entered the Hale household so quietly that no one noticed. She worked part-time as a housekeeper, hired through a cleaning service. 3 shifts a week, she walked through the vast penthouse, almost a private hotel, with a small badge that read, "Sofia R." To Ethan, she was nothing more than a faint shadow in his peripheral vision, someone he passed without ever registering her presence. But to Ella, Sofia was never a shadow, not even once. She first met Ella on a Monday morning when the little girl sat silently by the window clutching a doll with a torn sleeve. Sunlight touched her small face, making her blue eyes shimmer with a brightness far too sad for a child her age. Sofia froze. She had seen eyes like that before, eyes of children growing up inside the absence of the adults they needed most. "Hi, sweetheart," Sofia said gently. Ella looked at her for a moment, then gave a tiny nod. "Who are you?" "I'm Sofia. I just clean around here a bit." "Daddy's not home," Ella replied, as if that was the first thing anyone needed to know. Sofia gave her a soft, sorrowful smile. "That's all right. You don't have to be alone while I'm here." From that day on, whenever Sofia worked, Ella followed her quietly with a notebook and a handful of crayons. She didn't talk much, but her eyes stayed on Sofia's every movement, as if Sofia's presence was a fragile thread connecting her to a world that had grown too wide and too cold. Sofia wasn't paid to watch children. She knew that. But she also knew what it meant for a child to search for warmth inside rooms far too large. Because she had seen it before, inside her own son, Matteo. Just the thought of his name made a dull ache pulse in her chest. Matteo had been 4 years old, loved drawing red and blue circles on every scrap of paper, saying, "Mom, this is my universe." He used to run through their small apartment, laughing a clear, ringing laugh that could melt fatigue right off her bones. Until one morning, Matteo sat up with pale lips and whispered, "Mom, I'm tired. I don't want to stand up." A few weeks later came the diagnosis: acute leukemia. The next 18 months were battles Sofia prayed never to relive. Needles, chemo drips, sleepless nights, and strands of her son's hair falling into her hands. And then the moment Matteo took his final breath in her arms, splitting her future in two. After losing him, her marriage crumbled. Her husband, suffocating in a grief he couldn't face, slipped away from her life. Sofia moved to Chicago, starting over with an ordinary job and a hollowed-out heart, until she met Ella. In Ella, she saw everything she thought she had buried: fragility, loneliness, the quiet longing of a child who just wants someone to sit beside her. Every question Ella asked, every small, hesitant smile, tugged open the door Sofia had locked the day Matteo died. One afternoon, as Sofia folded towels in the laundry room, Ella asked softly, "Miss Sofia, was your mom beautiful?" Sofia paused. "Why do you ask?" "I think my mom was very beautiful. I think your mom was too." Shans. The simple honesty of that sentence pierced her like a soft blade. Sofia knelt, brushing Ella's hair with gentle fingers. "Yes, sweetheart, my mom was beautiful, and so was yours." From that moment, the affection Sofia felt for Ella was no longer something she tried to restrain. It was natural, like breathing. She came to the penthouse not just to work, but to make sure Ella didn't face the house's heavy silence alone. She didn't know that the bond she had formed would soon pull her into the center of a storm she was never prepared to confront. A storm surrounding the very child she had begun to love as her own. The change in Ella began so subtly it was almost invisible, like the first cold winds of winter brushing against the skin. Gentle, but leaving behind an uneasy warning. Sofia noticed it first. One morning, while wiping the window frame, Ella approached with swollen eyes and a hoarse voice. "Miss Sofia, my nose is bleeding," she whispered. In her hand was a tissue streaked with red. At first, Sofia tried to think rationally. Kids sometimes had nosebleeds in dry weather. But when she lowered her gaze to Ella's legs, she froze. Large purple bruises, the size of coins, stained her small shins as if someone had grabbed her too hard, though Sofia knew no one in that house would ever lay a hand on Ella. "Did you fall?" Sofia asked gently. Ella shook her head. "No, I just feel tired." The word tired slammed into Sofia's memory like a heavy knock. Matteo had said those same words one morning that changed her life forever. No, she told herself, it can't happen again. It can't. But fear clung to her even after her shift ended. She walked out into the soft Chicago snowfall, heart pounding, anxiety wrapping around her breath like invisible fog. That same day, Ethan received the call from the nanny. He was in Dallas inside a sleek conference room where neon lights reflected off a glass table. The phone buzzed non-stop, irritating him. He stepped out, answered, and heard the nanny's trembling voice. "Mr. Hale, it's about Ella." A handful of short sentences made the world tilt. He heard words like nosebleed, bruises, extreme fatigue, not normal. And suddenly, his legs felt numb. "Take her to Thornton Hospital immediately," he ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm coming home." But he didn't come home immediately. Urgent calls, a crucial signing, the last remaining commercial flight, everything tangled into a maze that delayed him by crucial hours. And when he finally rushed into the hospital, Ella had been in the emergency room for nearly 2 hours. The doctor stepped out with a gravity so severe that Ethan felt his stomach twist. "We ran some tests. These symptoms, we need to rule out some dangerous possibilities." "What possibilities?" Ethan asked, voice stiff. The doctor looked at him with the careful expression Ethan despised, because it always meant something terrible. "Bone marrow disorders, blood diseases, a high possibility of leukemia." The word dropped like a stone, cutting straight through Ethan's chest. He stood motionless, breath trapped, the hospital noise fading into a hollow silence around him. Ella was moved to a private room on the 3rd floor. The room was white, sterile, filled with machines humming steady but unforgiving rhythms. Sofia heard the news from the nanny in a tearful voice message. By the time she reached the hospital, night had fallen. She stood in the hallway for a long moment, clutching her bag as if it were an anchor. She knew exactly what awaited them, perhaps all too well. She entered the room to find Ella asleep, face pale, a small cloth beneath her nose still dotted with dried red. Ethan sat beside the bed, looking like someone who had fallen from a great height. His shoulders trembled without anyone touching him. He didn't recognize Sofia at first. Only when she laid a hand gently on the bed rail did he lift his head. What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, voice hollow. Sofia looked at Ella, then answered softly but firmly, "I'm here because Ella shouldn't be alone." Ethan stared at her, long enough that Sofia wondered if she had overstepped. But then he buried his face in his hands and exhaled a trembling breath. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I don't know where to even begin." For the first time, Sofia saw the real collapse of the powerful man. He was no longer the cold CEO, the confident billionaire. He was a father on the verge of losing his child. Sofia stepped closer. "Mr. Hale." He looked up. His eyes were red. "Leukemia isn't hopeless in every case, but Ella needs you, now, and every day after this." Ethan looked at Ella, small, fragile, like mist. He reached out to touch her hair, voice cracking. "God, she's just a little girl." Sofia stood beside the bed, her hand resting on the railing like a silent vow that she would not let Ella face this battle alone. Yet deep inside, her chest tightened painfully. No one left the hospital room immediately after that conversation. Ethan sat motionless, his hand still resting on Ella's hair, while Sofia stood by the bed like a soft, steady shadow, trying to keep her breath from trembling. The heart monitor beeped in steady rhythms, but inside both of them were frantic beats, tight with fear. And then, slowly, as if time knew they needed a moment to brace themselves, the next day arrived with harsher truths. Ella began intensive treatment right away. The hospital room, already painfully white, seemed even more unforgiving. The smell of disinfectant hung thick in the air. The first round of chemotherapy left Ella vomiting non-stop, each convulsion folding her small body like a leaf battered by the wind. Ethan signed every paper the doctors handed him: bone marrow therapy, imported drugs, an experimental protocol from Europe. Anything, as if money could bend fate back into his hands. But each passing day delivered worse reports. Cancer cells were not decreasing. Ella's body was weakening. A nurse sighed quietly as she adjusted a new IV bag, and that sound sent a chill down Sofia's spine. The Hale family's physician, who had known Ethan for years, looked at him with an expression Sofia recognized. It was the expression of someone who had witnessed too many tragedies, someone who knew the pain ahead, but still had to speak. "Mr. Hale," the doctor said gently during one meeting, "Ella is responding more poorly than we expected. The protocol isn't working." Ethan clenched the pen in his hand. "Then change it. If this medication isn't strong enough, use something stronger." "It doesn't work that way," the doctor replied softly. Ethan turned away, his voice icy but trembling beneath the surface. "I don't care. Continue." He walked down the hallway, leaving behind the doctor's final words, words Sofia happened to overhear. "He doesn't want to understand. It's very advanced." And that truth only became more visible as Ethan's visits grew fewer. He always arrived in perfect suits, carrying expensive gifts, robots, limited edition dolls, smart devices. But he never stayed long. A few strained questions. "How are you feeling?" "I brought this for you." "I have a meeting, but I'll be back." Ella smiled weakly, holding the gifts to her chest as if to keep him from worrying, not because they brought her joy. And the moment the door closed behind Ethan, Sofia appeared again, as if she were a natural part of the room. After her cleaning shifts, she went straight to the hospital. Nurses sometimes saw her rushing through the hallway, still dusted with traces of her work. She stayed with Ella every night, reading stories until her voice grew hoarse, drawing colorful stars to distract the girl from pain, holding her hand when needles pierced her fragile skin. Then came the day Ella's hair began to fall out in clumps. She held a handful of it, staring at it with wide, frightened eyes, as if watching herself fade away. Sofia knelt in front of her, pulling a dark blue bandana from her bag, decorated with yellow lightning bolts. "This," Sofia said, tying it gently, "is a superhero bandana. Only the bravest warriors get to wear it." Ella looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in days, she smiled, a small, faint smile, but so genuine it made Sofia want to cry. A passing nurse grinned warmly. "She looks just like you. You two are adorable." Sofia froze, about to correct her. But then Ella squeezed her hand and whispered, "You're here with me, just like a mom." Sofia could no longer speak. Since Mateo's death, she never imagined she could love another child like this. But Ella had opened that locked door, quietly, naturally, deeply. Ethan had no idea Sofia visited every day. He didn't know she sat through the nights beside his daughter. He didn't know how Sofia's heart broke as Ella grew weaker. He didn't know that in his absence, the only hand Ella reached for was hers. The following days carved away at the souls of everyone who loved Ella. She grew weaker by the day. Her skin turned pale like thin paper, and the pain attacks grew more violent, forcing Sofia to hold her hand tightly through each IV infusion so the little girl wouldn't curl up in fear. And then, on the morning of December 13th, as Sofia entered the room, she caught the look in Nurse Maggie's eyes, a look that needed no explanation. "They're looking for Mr. Hale," Maggie whispered. "The doctor wants a private meeting." Sofia froze. Her heart clenched. She had seen this scene before. A confidential meeting, a doctor's heavy face, parents standing before a verdict they could not fight. Ethan arrived minutes later, exhaustion written all over him, his clothes still smelling of winter air. The doctor led him into a small conference room at the end of the hall. The door closed, trapping every last ounce of hope outside. Sofia stood a distance away, arms wrapped around herself as if to stop her heart from shattering. Inside, the doctor didn't soften the blow. He laid the charts on the table, paused, then looked straight at Ethan. "Mr. Hale, Ella's body is no longer responding to any treatment. Ethan frowned, clinging to a thin, desperate thread of hope. Then we switch protocols, experimental drugs, bone marrow transplant. We talked about— "We can't perform a transplant," the doctor interrupted, voice low and full of sorrow. "Ella is far too weak. The surgery would end her life on the table." Ethan went still. His eyes were open, but his soul felt absent. The doctor continued, each word slicing the air like a blade. "At this point, all we can offer is palliative care, keeping Ella comfortable." "Palliative?" Ethan echoed, as if the term were foreign. "Mr. Hale," the doctor inhaled deeply, "Ella has 1 to 2 weeks left, maybe less." Silence fell, thick and crushing. Somewhere far down the hallway, a monitor beeped urgently, but in Ethan's mind, everything sank into a hollow, deafening hum. He stood up mechanically, the chair falling backward unnoticed. He walked out of the conference room, passing right by Sofia, without seeing her. No words, no breath. Only the shell of a man whose heart had caved in. He reached the parking garage, opened his car, sat in the driver's seat, and slammed the door shut, as if sealing himself from the world. For a few seconds, he tried to breathe, 1, 2, 3, until everything collapsed. Tears burst from him violently, unexpectedly, like a storm breaking after years of drought. He cried. For the first time since Rachel died, he truly cried. "My little girl! God, Ella!" He choked into the steering wheel, his sobs ricocheting off the metal in sharp, merciless echoes. No one saw him. No one comforted him. It was just him and the brutal truth inside the small, suffocating space of his car. When the tears finally slowed, he drove to his office without knowing why. He stepped inside, closed the door, pulled the blinds shut, and turned off his phone. For 2 days he didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't speak. He just sat in the dark, staring at a photo of Ella on his desk. Ella healthy, bright-eyed, alive. "Why," he whispered, "why wasn't I there when she needed me?" Guilt, 3 years in the making, finally crushed him completely. The 2 days Ethan locked himself away in darkness wrapped the entire hospital in a similar heaviness. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it in the air, like the halls were holding their breath. Meanwhile, Sofia kept coming every afternoon after her shift, pushing open Ella's door with a smile she barely held together, her hands trembling each time she touched the handle. Ella slept more now, breathing tiny, fragile breaths, each one sounding like she was borrowing a little more time from the world. Even in sleep, the girl reached for Sofia's hand, gripping it gently, as if that small warmth was the only anchor she had left. But Sofia still hadn't heard the official news. She just felt Ella slipping, hour after hour. Then, on a bitter Chicago afternoon, when the wind felt sharp enough to cut skin, Nurse Maggie appeared at the doorway, eyes swollen. She motioned for Sofia to step into the hall. "What happened?" Sofia whispered, though her voice barely existed. Maggie swallowed hard, meeting her eyes. "Sofia." The doctor spoke with Ella's father. Sofia froze. Her heart clenched as if preparing itself to shatter. "How much time?" Maggie shook her head, tears spilling. "She won't make it to Christmas. A week, maybe a few days." For a moment, Sofia felt her soul leave her body. The white hallway stretched endlessly, the cold lights flickering like blades. She placed a hand on the wall so she wouldn't collapse. Another child, another tiny life being torn away. Mateo had died the week before Christmas. He had said the same thing Ella did. Just one more Christmas. She never got to give him that. Now Ella. Another promise slipping through her fingers. That night, Sofia stayed beside Ella until after 1 o'clock in the morning. Ella woke briefly, her voice a thin tremble of sound. "Miss Sophia," she whispered, "I just want one more Christmas with my dad." Sophia felt her chest crack open. She leaned down, holding Ella with a gentleness so fragile she feared she might break her. "Sweetheart." I know," Sophia said, voice shaking. "I promise you'll get your Christmas." Ella fell asleep again, her tiny fingers wrapped around Sophia's. Sophia didn't sleep at all. She sat there watching the girl, her skin pale as paper, eyelashes nearly gone, breath shallow. Sophia knew Ella didn't have weeks. She had days, maybe hours. And if Christmas wouldn't come in time, Sophia would bring it to her, not on December 25th, but on the 19th, the last day Ella might still have strength to feel magic. So Sophia began her race against time. On the first day, she visited a small family-owned decoration shop. The scent of dried pine and cinnamon filled the air. She chose a mini Christmas tree with color-changing LEDs, red ornaments, gold garlands. The shopkeeper noticed her tired eyes and quietly gave her a discount without asking a single question. On the second day, she went to a bookstore. She found a Christmas storybook with shimmering silver embossing, bright illustrations like snow under lights. She bought crayons too, so Ella could draw angels, snow, dreams she'd never see outside the hospital. Then she visited the toy store, the place where Ella once pressed her face to the glass to admire a ballerina doll. The doll wore a sparkling white tutu, golden hair in a perfect bun. Sophia bought it using nearly all her savings. That night she sat in her small kitchen and hand-sewed a Christmas stocking from thick red fabric. The needle pricked her finger. A drop of blood stained the cloth, but she didn't stop. She embroidered the letters, E-L-L-A. Each stitch was a prayer, a plea, a goodbye. On the third day, Sophia gathered Maggie and the other nurses. They all agreed to help, cookies, music, clearing equipment to hang lights. "We'll set everything up on the night of the 19th, Sophia said, steady and determined. "That will be Ella's Christmas." A nurse asked, "What about Ethan?" Sophia looked down at her hands, marked with tiny red needle pricks. "I can't tell him," she whispered, "because if I do, he might stop me. Or," her voice broke, "or he won't show up." Sophia looked out the window. Snow fell quietly, softly, like the last breath of a prayer. "No matter what," she whispered, "I won't let Ella leave this world without her Christmas." On the night of December 19th, Chicago glowed under a soft silver haze, as if the sky had laid a thin frost over every rooftop and every branch. Snow drifted down slowly, gently, as though the heavens were trying to delay time, to hold on to something that was slipping away. Sophia stepped off the bus, hugging a large canvas bag to her chest, feeling her heartbeat thudding hard against the cold. Inside the bag were the mini Christmas tree, strings of lights, ornaments, the storybook, crayons, the red stocking embroidered with Ella's name, and the gold-wrapped box containing the ballerina doll she had dreamed of. She hurried into the hospital, her shoes soaked from snow, but her heart burning with a strange, steadfast warmth. Outside Ella's room, Maggie and several nurses waited, each carrying something small: a tray of warm cookies, a speaker, sheets of paper snowflakes. They didn't say much. A single look, a single nod was enough to tell her they all understood what this night was meant to be. The sterile white room slowly transformed beneath their hands. Sophia hung the LED lights along the window frame, their warm glow softening every harsh corner. Maggie set the small tree on the table and carefully hung each ornament so it caught the light just right. A nurse pressed paper snowflakes onto the glass so that when Ella woke, the world before her would look like winter had arrived just for her. When everything was ready, Sophia stepped toward the bed and gently touched Ella's shoulder. "Ella, sweetheart, Wake up." Ella opened her eyes slowly, her thin lashes trembling. She looked around the newly decorated room, and the soft lights reflected in her eyes like thousands of tiny stars. "Is it Christmas?" Sofia smiled, though her vision blurred. "It is your Christmas, just for you." Ella's smile spread across her pale face, a flicker of warmth fighting its way through the cold. Sofia helped her sit up with extra pillows, then opened the Christmas storybook. Her voice was soft, warm, steady, though it wavered with emotion. Ella listened as if each sentence were a little lantern lit just for her. They sang small carols together, Ella's voice barely more than a whisper, but every note felt miraculous. Then they drew pictures. Ella held the crayons with trembling fingers, sketching snowflakes, a tiny blonde angel, and a Christmas tree far larger than the one in the room. Sofia held the page steady, occasionally brushing Ella's hand with gentle warmth. Finally, Sofia handed her the gold-wrapped box. Ella opened it slowly, unwrapping it as though revealing a treasure. When the ballerina doll appeared, her eyes widened, shimmering with a light Sofia thought she'd never see again. "She's beautiful." "Just like you," Sofia murmured. Ella hugged the doll to her chest, then turned to Sofia, her eyes full of a love so pure it nearly broke the woman holding her. "Merry Christmas, Sofia. I love you." Tears spilled down Sofia's cheeks before she could even answer. She pulled Ella into a delicate embrace, holding her as if holding the most fragile piece of the universe. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than you know." Neither of them knew that just outside the glass door, a man was standing. Ethan. He had come tonight determined to finally do something right. But as he reached Ella's room and looked inside, something inside him shattered. He saw Ella smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in months. He saw the tree, the lights, the cookies, the new doll, everything made for her. And he realized none of it came from him. He opened the door slowly, almost reverently. Sofia turned, startled. But Ethan didn't look at her. He knelt beside Ella, took her small hand, and broke into tears, raw, unrestrained, without pride. "Dad, are you staying?" Ethan nodded hard. "I'm staying. I'm not leaving again. I promise." Ella smiled and squeezed his hand. When she returned to hugging her doll, Ethan looked at Sofia, gratitude, pain, and awakening in his eyes. "Why did you do all this?" Sofia inhaled, placing a hand over her heart. "Because I once had a son, Mateo, and Ella. She reminds me of everything I lost. I couldn't let her go without one last Christmas." In that moment, Ethan understood everything, about Ella, about Sofia, and about himself. After that secret Christmas Eve, none of them left the hospital again. Ethan called his assistant and canceled every meeting, every business trip, every obligation that once pulled him away from his daughter. Sofia requested time off, grabbed a small bag of essentials, and returned to Ella's room as if the only place she belonged now was here. Beside the two souls her heart had tied itself to. The last 3 days passed as softly as Ella's fading breaths, yet they felt so full that each moment etched itself deep into their memories. Ethan and Sofia took turns wiping Ella's face, adjusting her pillows, and telling her stories. Sometimes Ella was too weak to speak. She simply held their hands, Sofia on one side, Ethan on the other, as if she were trying to stitch two strangers into the family she wished they could be. They told her stories about Rachel. Ethan spoke with a breaking voice, and Sofia gently encouraged him with small nods. They talked about Mateo, too. Sofia spoke with a trembling smile, and Ella whispered, "I bet Mateo in heaven is dancing ballet with my doll." The words made Ethan bite his lip until it bled, because it was the first time he truly felt the depth of the grief Sofia had carried alone. On the second day, Ella whispered, "I want to share host bread like at church. Sofia understood immediately. She slipped out of the room and hurried to the small chapel at the end of the hall. In the warm glow of candlelight, she asked the priest for a small piece of communion bread for the three of them. When she returned, Ella smiled like a small angel and lifted the piece with her fragile hands. "For us," Ella said, "so we stay together." Ethan bowed his head, tears falling onto her hand. Sofia held Ella's other hand, silently begging time to slow down. On the final day, when Ella's breaths had grown so faint they seemed to disappear into the air, she opened her eyes one last time and looked at the two people beside her. "Be happy," Ella whispered. "Don't be sad because of me." Ethan collapsed over her hand. Sofia covered her mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. In that moment, the tiny girl taught them a truth neither had ever understood. Love isn't about holding on, it's about showing up. And Ethan understood. For the first time, he didn't run from pain. He stayed, until her very last breath. Before dawn on December 22nd, the night outside the hospital window began to fade, revealing faint streaks of winter blue. In the small room, still scented with Christmas cookies and glowing with the soft lights of the miniature tree, Ella took a long, fragile breath, thin as a thread ready to snap. Ethan, who hadn't slept all night, sensed it first. He leaned closer and whispered, voice trembling, "Sofia, wake up. She's close." Sofia sat up instantly, her eyes red and tired, yet gentle as they fell on Ella. They didn't need to speak. They simply moved to each side of the bed, each holding one of Ella's small hands, growing colder by the minute, forming a final circle of love to keep her tethered to the world just a little longer. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and slow as the last breath of night. Sofia leaned in and started singing, her voice thin but warm like an old wool blanket. Silent night, holy night. The melody drifted through the room, mingling with the faint beeping of the monitor. Ella opened her eyes slowly, looking at Ethan and then at Sofia, the corners of her lips lifting into a tiny, unbearable smile. "I'm not scared," she whispered, her voice barely a ripple on still water. Ethan broke down, but he didn't turn away. He let her see his tears. "Daddy's here, sweetheart," he whispered. "We're both here." Ella's breaths weakened with each flicker of the Christmas lights. And then, at exactly 3 minutes past 5 in the morning, surrounded by the glowing colors Sofia had hung, with a lullaby still floating half-finished in the air, Ella released one final breath and didn't take another. The room stayed bright, warm, almost beautiful, like she had chosen this moment, this tiny Christmas of her own, to leave. Ethan bowed his head over her hand, not wailing, just trembling as if his body was relearning how to exist. Sofia rested a hand on his shoulder, offering the kind of silence that comforts more deeply than words. From that moment, Ethan changed forever. He no longer returned to endless meetings, no longer used work as armor against grief. He poured his wealth and influence into building the Ella Foundation, a charity for children with cancer and their families. Sofia never returned to housekeeping. Ethan asked her to become the program director of the foundation, the one who would carry her warmth, her gentleness, her compassion to hundreds of other children. She agreed, not for the title, but for Ella. They never became a couple, but they became family, a family chosen, bonded by the memory of the little girl who transformed both of their lives. And every year on December 19th, they plug in the old mini Christmas tree, its lights reflecting softly on their quiet, peaceful faces. "Merry Christmas, Ella," they whisper. "We love you."